I just realized that Tuco is one letter from Zuko, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Hey, you geeks! This is the big one. The big spoilers review of Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Now, to make this video comparable to other book reviews and not absurdly long, I'm only going to be focusing on my mostly enjoyment, of the narrative structure and character arcs within this book. If you want to hear me go into detail on Brandon Sanderson's diction in this book, check out my Patreon also for bonus content. Now strap in as we dive in to full spoilers. You have been warned. Journey to the West. It really says a lot about my sheltered upbringing that I skipped right over the obvious Pokemon reference with Kaladin and Zeth's journey defeating the gym bosses along their way. But when my friends pointed it out to me, it really clicked.
I will travel across the land, searching far and wide.
I love that Sanderson's writing works on both levels. For on the surface level, this is just a fun adventure story to rid an ancient land of an even more ancient evil. But there are certain twists and turns, surprises, and gems along the way. I loved Zeth's slow journey of self-realization of his own inner hypocrisy, that he believed it was right, that he could no longer determine what was right, and he had put his faith in all of the wrong people before. And I love how Kaladin helped him along the way with copious amounts of stew and reflection and conversation, all thus leading up to the perfect stormification of
your bodyguard is Gardner.
When Kaladin declares himself to be Zeth's therapist before Ishar. Meanwhile, Kaladin is having a relatively easy time of it, really. He gets to dance with Syl and discover that that is something that he also wants to do aside from helping people. Now, before these preview chapters dropped, I would not have fathomed that these two would have a romantic relationship. During the preview chapters, we in the comments had kind of concocted a sort of Little Mermaid-esque plot for Syl going to Ishar that was just so disturbing on so many levels. So I view it as a sweet, sweet irony that it is Kaladin who ended up being the one to go to Ishar to get a Spren body instead. On top of all of this good footing for a strong romance, I love that Kaladin's arc can now be summarized in a song from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
His body may be past its peak, but his soul's in paradise.
As for the ending of this iconic westward journey, going into the book, I was like 90% certain that Kaladin would somehow end up being all the Herald's therapist, but I wasn't certain exactly how that would happen. Now that he has taken Jezreel's place as King of Herald and Herald of Kings,
The king of jesters and jester of a king.
it all fits really well. As for Zeth, well, prior to reading the book, I had chalked him up for death as a noble sacrifice to atone for his actions. But while reading the book, Sanderson reminded me effectively that that is what he desired in book 1, and how that was not a healthy thought for him. Once realizing that I was on board with him remaining alive but really lacked the time to theorize concretely before Zeth became a one-armed sheep herder and living a life of peace in Shinovar, which I think suits him just well, as he now, lacking an arm, probably won't be picked on by any rulers to become a weapon again, at least until Stormlight returns in the back 5. Sheep herder. Now we witness an absolute masterclass in cultural gaslighting by Ishar. It all starts, of course, with the poor fate of Molly the Ewe, who I should not have been surprised met a fate described in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Phoenix attacked a passing goat. Soon the wretched creature was no more.
Of course, Sanderson managed to mix in a Peter Pan homage as Zev climbs the boats of the pirates to go and rescue his friends in stealth epic fashion. Beware the doodle-doo, indeed. Despite this almost promising beginning of building bonds of friendship and trust and camaraderie, Zeth's hopes and dreams are squashed yet again by the honor bearers, who insist that he cannot know what is right unless they tell him so, a belief that his father had unwittingly ignited in Zeth from a very young age. During these flashbacks, I had to constantly remind myself that Naturo, Zeth's father, was destined to bear the bondsmith honor blade, as Zeth said he had at the end of Rhythm of War. Now, we also know that Zeth had abandoned his father's name by the beginning of Way of Kings in the iconic almost opening line. Thus, even the sweet scenes between Zeth and his fathers read for me the first time as truly tragic, and the tragic flaws began to grow as Zeth begins what seems to check all the wily fantasy protagonist boxes of a rebellion against the evil honor bearers, but his training as a swordsman had not prepared him to be a military leader, as he berates his companions and pins them into unwinnable situations. Thus, even when he thinks he is doing right and well, we the reader know something bad is going to happen very soon. And we further get reminded through the narrative structure of how poor his military training was when compared with the training Adolin gives Gox in Azamir. Remember the Azamir. Adolin's death seemed to be the most feared and anticipated outcome of Wind and Truth. For me, he was just too squishy not to die. He wasn't a radiant, and he was so gosh darn lovable. I mean, the man was just too good for the honor-forsaken world of Roshar. Thus, I was quite relieved that all he ended up was losing a foot after taking down a Thunderclast like a stormy boss. Sanderson seems to use Adolin as showing a new path forward with a new form of lowercase honor. A path where it's not just about making oaths for oaths' sake, but about discerning what is right and promising to do that. Thus, Adolin's work in Azamir is about paving a pathway forward, while other characters' arcs are more about wrapping up the past. Both are important, but it's Adolin's determination to fight for that future, despite his lack of radiance, that inspires Gox to do likewise, and lead his people in the reverse direction of the Swiss Guard's last stand, to go from the boat hole to the regal seat, and still the Sabaton song works. Adolin's bond with Maya further shows that just because honor is dead, lowercase honor and bonds still live on and are able to grant new powers to the worthy, if not radiant. If there is one thing I've learned about shard blades and deadeyes in this book, is that I know nothing about shard blades and deadeyes in Roshar. While I'm a bit peeved that the explanation, it is given, but I still need to sort it out a bit more, doesn't quite make sense yet, I will admit that the rule of cool of the 10 shard bearers suiting up to face the torrent of red, white, and black is quite iconic and sweeps away many of my objections. From a rough survey of fan reactions, it seems that Adolin's plot was the tipping point for many readers. Those who disliked his plot disliked the book, and vice versa. For me, Kaladin's arc remained the heart of this story, but where would Kaladin be without his best wingman, Adolin? I ask you. Love on the Spectrum. This isn't just a queer romance, this is a gay romance set mostly in an extra-dimensional realm where time, space, and reality bend. They're trying to hunt down an evil god while being tormented with visions of their past. So it's hard to sum up. Yet, despite this being fantastical in its telling, there are still parts that I find highly relatable. Renarin's on the spectrum, I'm not far off the spectrum myself, and do find it hard to express my feelings in a few number of words.
Like ever since we started going out, it's like I'm gasping for air, you know?
I did enjoy learning about Relane's past and seeing how the haphazard listeners were able to test a spy force of one, which of course has to be poor Relane because he's weird and has no friends. Lastly, I do appreciate that Sanderson paralleled the human singer romance that almost brought peace before the Recreants with this new human singer relationship between Renarin and Relane that might just bring about peace in the future. I wasn't really surprised with the betrayal of Ba Ada Mishram since Kalak said as much in his epigraphs in Rhythm of War. With the compass scene early in Wind and Truth, I was expecting a scene from Pocahontas, and I ended up getting one. Just not the scene I was expecting. 4 funerals and the wedding. Beyond my reading buddy, I have a few friends who are also currently working through Wind and Truth, and one of them came up to me at the end of day 2 and said that Shallan was totally pregnant. With that kind of successful foreshadowing, I see Shallan and Adolin's shower escapade worth the page time to set up that important plot point for the back 5. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, lest we forget the wonders of Shallan's journey itself in Wind and Truth. It seemed like there was general anticipation for Shallan to backslide again in this book, and even go so far as to assume the role of Formless to become Odium's champion. Being aware of all this speculation of Shallan's character, and then some, it did feel like Sanderson spent the most time scraping that 4th wall to get all of the fan base on the same page. No, Shallan had not statistically killed off all of her mentors. Yes, she had defeated Formless in full in Rhythm of War, but that did not mean she had lost the potential to make the wrong choice in the future, since she is more or less human and has free will.
Everybody got that?
More or less human because, yes, in fact, her mother is Shanarach. This revelation wasn't as shocking to me by the time I got to it in the book, though I was fully on board to that fan theory. I also got to attend Adolin and Shallan's wedding reception, where yes, the Herald Shanarach was indeed a brief wedding crasher before she got escorted out by Wit. I do find it fitting and more than amusing that Shallan has indeed attempted to make peace with the Ghostbloods, because on the meta Peter Pan level of the Cosmere, the Lost Boys totally shot Wendy with an arrow before she landed in Neverland to become their mother.
This is a lady. Toodles has killed her.
And now Shallan is an expecting mother. It just fits so well. I'm excited for the back six. I quibbles notwithstanding, I very much enjoyed her plot. Adversaries. I should probably say something about the large cast of secondary antagonists. For Kaladin, I was surprised that Ishar hadn't brought in an unmade to do his dirty work in Shinovar. Shallan trying to convert Mraize was less successful, but I like how their plots to deal with the threat by making them choose what is right mirrored Cultivation and then Dalinar's journey to fight Odium by having Taravangian make the right decision. Unfortunately, Dalinar and Cultivation, of course, did not succeed. Neither did Sigzil with the traitor formerly known as Moash, with his new impaired vision and his spiffy black uniform and his desire to hunt down and betray all of his former comrades in arms. He's giving me strong 1990s adaptation of Rochefort, specifically from The Three Musketeers.
Don't let having only one eye impair your vision. The loss of the other could be most inconvenient.
He, like the other antagonists, all got a moment to relish in the consequences of his actions and chose the wrong thing. Thus, my scant hopes for Moash's eventual redemption are even scanter now, especially since Renarin's visions seem to imply that the Darth Vader redemption arc is reserved for the cognitive shadow of the Blackthorn. But I will still never say never until he is dead, and even then I'm sure the shards negotiate. Shattered Dreams. Okay, the Shattered Plains arc was technically well written, but it just didn't spark as much joy as I anticipated while reading it. Part of it was probably due to the peculiar form of suspense that the Sunlit Man gives us. We know that Sigzil is going to leave Roshar in disgrace. We know he's going to lose his honor spren. Now, usually in tragedy, knowing the ending isn't going to ruin the story.
The story you are about to see has been told before. A lot.
But there was just something off about this one. Another weird thing about this section was L. He had such build-up in Rhythm of War, getting the final epigraphs. And yet, even with his interlude after day 2, both he and Daigo Narthis' Price aren't really mentioned ever again. True, Venli has some interactions with him, and I find it intriguing that his mercy to the listeners in sending them in as a second wave proved he is more humane towards his own than the likes of Sadius was for the humans, but also more cruel to his enemies, since it was this little maneuver that allowed the traitor formerly known as Moash to get in place. Now, that traitor formerly known as Moash definitely rained on my parade that was the charge of the Chasm Fiends. There's nothing I can really complain about all of this. Venli has an interesting perspective where we learn cool new things, and the listeners get their land back as is just. But there's nothing for me really to gush over either. Yas Queen. Now comes a criticism that's sort of hard for me to pin down, so, like Renarin, I'm going to use a lot of words. I've previously observed that Sanderson paired off a passionate character with a rational one at each of the various fronts, and it seemed inevitable that one of those fronts would fail. But myself and the general fandom did not anticipate it being Yasna's reason to fail with Fenn's passion. Though I'm not sure why we all had this expectation, because Yasna from book 1 has said that she is bad at dealing with other people's emotions. And that is the key we see in every other front line, including Kaladin's, to winning their battle. Bringing Yasna to Thalina, a regal republic, makes her face those problems much earlier. And with hindsight, I can kind of see how she may have lost Thaylen City as soon as she withdrew the Radiant troops. For when Fenn confides in Yasna her fears for herself and her people, Yasna says, "I have Dalinar's authority to do so. We can't reach Azamir with that Oathgate down, but we can do this much. You could be killing me and my kind. My moral philosophy is to do the most good I can in any situation," Yasna said. Fenn slipped her hand from Yasna's. Thus, while Fenn's betrayal of Yasna felt almost inevitable on my reread, it still didn't really make sense. Odium drives a wedge between the two queens when he points out early that Yasna would do anything to protect hers and her own, while Fenn says she would not. I don't know if I would, Fenn whispered. Yasna froze. "Oh, I'd bluster," Fenn said. "I'd scream and I'd be angry, but assassinating a friend?" The paper went limp in her fingers. "I've always worried I'm too soft for this job." Then Fenn goes on to follow Yasna's example and do whatever it takes to protect her and her own and side with Odium. How she arrived there just baffles me, because Yasna is so rationally based she can only focus on Fenn's voice rationalizations, not the emotion, the passion that must have driven Fenn to that outcome. And I really would have liked a perspective from Fenn here so that we, the reader, could feel that passion. In Oathbringer, she had a passion for straight talk and really valued when Dalinar didn't use fine words with her, but just told her like it was. Is that what motivates her away from Yasna here towards Odium's seemingly straight talk with her? Tanner, almighty. Lastly, but certainly not least, is Dalinar's journey from the base of Urithiru to its summit, where he metaphorically falls because he refuses to deal with the divine entity on top. This carefully worded summary also works for Virgil's fate in the Purgatorio, but while their beginnings and ends are similar, their journeys are quite different. Dalinar's journey begins with a rather extensive info dump by Wit, and I don't hate it here. Heck, one of my friends still working through the book loves that Wit has become a fully realized character. I'm a bit on the fence because this is a lot of new rules for 4 thick books into a series. Though when the wisdom of Wit fails, Dalinar finds himself on an unexpected journey with Navani and little Gavinor as a surprise in the worst family vacation ever.
Dad, I want to go home.
About Navani, I do appreciate how Sanderson has magically empowered the act of connecting with and caring for another person. Her caring for Gav is the only obstacle Odium has to overcome in order to get his ideal champion. Dalinar did basically everything wrong in that regard. Though even when she returns to Urithiru with Gav in tow, once she handed him off to his nursemaid who had consistently failed to watch after the kid during the most crucial 10 days of existence, I had no doubts that he would still somehow become Odium's champion. Now for what Dalinar and Navani learned on their little quest.
You're playing with the big boys now.
When witnessing the founding of the Oath Pact, Navani confesses to the reader that she was expecting palaces and knights in shining armor, which shows about how she envisioned the glory of Tanavast. I didn't expect that per se, because I had linked in my brain Tanavast to certain Mesopotamian-rooted deities. And frankly, while they lacked shining armor in their myths, even a nomad shepherd outside of could throw a more aesthetic barbecue for his covenant with his god than the 9 most powerful humans on Roshar. They squabble like children in a sad canvas tent in a pitiful drizzle. Like, Tanavast, is this really the best you can do?
I think I could help the world.
The world? Mm-hmm. That wasn't the world. That was just Buffalo between 57th Street and Commonwealth.
The fact that this was so haphazard really spoke to how that loophole of getting tortured for eternity on Braze cropped up in there. And it was kind of a relief for me that Tanavast brought that about not through vindictive adherence to oaths, but rather his own ignorance and lack of foresight. I love how Dalinar solved the unwinnable situation posed to him by Teravangium Odium, to either kill the innocent Gavinor or consign his own soul to damnation. Dalinar solves with a brilliant use of literary theft by letting his adversary just monologue about all of his evil schemes.
You sly dog! You got me monologuing! I can't believe it.
And then embrace him in a way that foils all of his carefully laid plans. This is good connections and great literary theft that I do love, and love Wind and Truth for overall. Despite its hiccups and bumps, this was a well-written and enjoyable journey for me, and I hope it was for you as well. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Please like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more, and check out my Patreon for extra content. Thanks for watching. Bye!